Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review The Hunt. So, I found that this movie was on HBO Max, so there, in fact, I'm like, you know what, I want to rewatch this movie because I really enjoyed it, and plus, it was just kind of like a fun thing to just kind of look back at this movie, like, God, this was such a good film when it was to actually originally come out because, like, it was right around that time where it was very scarce, or it was really hard to really find anything that was really good that came out. So this is like the only movie that really felt good while watching because like I think the movie the Countdown came out around that time, and there was some other kind of movies that I think came out around that time where I was just kind of like, yeah, not so good. But then I watched this movie, The Hunt, which I'm like, okay, what is the whole pig thing? Seems kind of random. A lot of this movie felt very random, but I just really enjoyed it because it's the kind of random that works. That feels like a weird thing to say. It's the right kind of random. It's the right kind of thing where you're like, oh, okay, I think I can get into this. There's even at points when we don't even have real names for most of the characters because either that they don't live very long, or really it's just the fact that really we're not going to have names being spewed out every 5 seconds of like, oh, who are you? I'm Steve. Who are you? I'm Beth. Who are you? I'm Clive. Like that doesn't happen very much. And plus the only person to really have a name is the person to probably be in this movie the longest, the person where you're going to have to actually invest in, and that is the person that actually gets the names. Besides, probably a lot of the people who are the killers in this movie are the ones who actually have names. And there are points in time where most of these characters are having to have like goofy code names like Snowball or some other goofy thing that doesn't quite like make sense, but it's all to be tied to otherwise some book at some point in this movie. So going into this film, I really did enjoy this movie, hence me wanting to rewatch it and go back into it just because it was like it was one of those where like the concept of it is really interesting. So what has to end up happening is we are to have these rich business people who are to not go into or go into. There's a lot of very weird kind of things about this where people are to not really divulge, or people are to divulge and maybe swerve a person that something is going on. There's a lot of swerving going on. There's a way of just to confuse a person going on here, which I do eventually enjoy in this film. So what is to happen is there is to be these business executives or these business people high up in the corporate ladder, probably, who are all to decide to eventually put together this manor or manor gate. So supposedly somebody took that feed that these people were spouting about, talking about certain people that are in the rungs of their job, and just kind of making fun of them or whichever, but also just they are to say that they can't wait for Manorgate. So all of a sudden there is to be a stealing of this feed, and then all of a sudden a lot of social media people just take advantage of that, or a lot of social media people just start posting videos or are to eventually just kind of do something with this and go viral with it. And so all of these rich people that live in this corporate ladder of things, they all decide to go and collect every single one of these people that are all to talk about Manorgate and slowly but surely wipe them all out in this one massive section of this supposed place where there are to be decoyish like things like gas stations that aren't really gas stations, and like this is a world that seems to never end, where it just seems like everything is to be completely not exactly what it is to actually be. So it makes for a very interesting first watch through, because you're just like, oh my god, like, man, this reach seemingly seems endless. And God, was this such a fun movie? Because eventually we would just have one character that seems to be one thing smarter of all others, and I'm like, oh my god, this is such an interesting character, which eventually we find out is a girl named Crystal, and she is to basically have this distrust of everyone, and then all of a sudden, like, this movie just starts to become this like weird, bizarrish game of sorts, and then all of a sudden it eventually turns at some point somewhere and becomes this revenge movie. And I just thought that that was so interesting, how all of a sudden the will of somebody, like, that's kind of how, like, I would say, similar to the movie Final Girl, where we have this one girl who is to go into this midst of all these boys, and so all the boys are just like, yeah, she's gonna get it, and then really it all turns around and the girl is like, no, you're going to get it. Because you didn't realize that I've trained for this for years of my life to come and get you, because I know what you do. I know who you are, and I'm cleaning house, motherfucker. So I love revenge stories. I love, like, when you, like, get a movie that you're kind of like surprised about, where you're just like, whoa, like, this movie is very vastly different and much more intelligent than I, like, would have thought when I went into here randomly and just watched a film. Which, like, that's the thing that I love about films, that films can actually surprise you in a good way, and you could be like, whoa, I need to, like, thank God I checked this out, or thank God I went into this film, because this film is actually, like, surprising. Like, it feels very random, but it's random in a good way. So, anyways, that's all that I wanted to say about this movie in a very cryptic like sense. I think it's to move on and get into this in spoiler like sense. Really enjoyed this movie. If you haven't seen it, go out of your way to say that you've seen it by going into HBO Max. If money is tight and you want to delightfully not have to pay to watch this movie, to get into subscriptions of HBO Max and whichever, I have been using two apps recently consistently. There is an app called Yes Movies. It'll be called, like, Yes Movies, but I think it'll be, the logo will say Yes Movies and Shows. Go ahead and check that out. There is also another app that I've been using consistently called Fox HD Movies. The logo will say so, but I think the title, like, is to be goofy. Like, it's to have, like, one 1080p movies or something like that. But if you search Fox HD Movies, this app should come up fairly quickly. And then, because the logo will say so, and you'll be able to find it fairly quickly, I would assess or assume. So, going into this, let's go into that coveted double 5-time territory. Because, yeah, I just, like, if you've never seen this movie, go ahead and do so. It's such an enjoyable thing. Like, if action is not your bag, or if you might think that this movie's like, okay, this is too random, I'm just gonna click, then that's perfectly fine. But in time, like, it's a really enjoyable movie that you kind of have to understand eventually what is eventually going on the further on that this movie goes. It's kind of like, it feels very much like Cabin in the Woods, which I think is an amazing movie with Chris Hemsworth. Sigourney Weaver is in that film. If you've never seen Cabin in the Woods before, definitely check that out too. That movie was freaking awesome. And so, yeah, let's go out of our way to say that we've seen this film because we have. And let's go out of our way to hope that we can figure out all the casting names of all this. So it is spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we get to spoil this movie. So I might have a arduous process to try to think of who all of these people are. So fingers crossed I can figure out who all these people are at one point in time. Because they all have these weird, bizarre nicknames. Like, one person is just to be called Dead Sexy because she's to quickly die. Weirdly enough. One girl is just to be called Yoga Pants. So, telling you now. So, let's get into this. So, very beginning of the movie is to be this, because spoilers now, there's to be this feed of texting that is going on between all these corporate fat cats that are probably in some business corporation somewhere. Just man, I just have some break time, so I'm just gonna go and talk about like just what's going on in the office and just bad mouthing some officer or some coworker or whichever. And but all of a sudden, eventually, this feed is to continually talking about God. I can't wait till Manorgate. Like, yeah, El Manorgate, yeah, like I can't wait. And then all of a sudden, there's to be one person who is to mention like, hey, like don't talk about that on anything because like it's going to get out somehow. Like thread deleted. So because they kept on talking about it. So all of a sudden, we are to find out that this feed, bizarrely, some way or another, just gets out in the ether, and like social media people just get a hold of it, and so we go from this scene to just transition us bizarrely into this plane with these obvious rich people that we have a guy named Richard who is to be talking to this girl on this plane, and she is to mention like, hey, would you like some would you like some like certain kind of food? And Richard's like, no, like, you know what, like, do you have some like cooked vegetables, like certain kind of like vegetables? And she's like, I'm sorry, sir, this isn't like, we don't have a kitchen in this plane. Like, we only have certain foods. And he's like, you know what, like, man, like maybe I asked too much. Like, so, like, we have like these people that are to ask for very specific things within a plane. Like, as if there's to be Master Chef on the back of the plane just waiting for, oh my god, I hope somebody asks for like a wild random thing of food that I'm to serve them for some odd reason. So all of a sudden there is to be some random hillbilly that is to all of a sudden run to the front of this plane to be like, hey, like, what's going on? Where am I? Who am I? Why am I? And so all of a sudden we have this doctor who is to tell the guy like, hey, like, you know what, like, be calm, like, I'll explain everything to you, just lie down on the ground and just, yeah, like, lie down like right by these towels and I'll explain everything to you, believe me. And so the doctor is to tell the guy like, hey, or is to tell the stewardess, could you give me that pen, please? And the doctor's like, yes, I will explain everything to you. Just calm down, just relax, just be on these towels and just feel good about yourself. When I jab you in the neck with this freaking pen, and we're like, oh my god, what is going on? And so all of a sudden this guy's bleeding from the neck. He gets back up from where he is and is starting to eventually take this thing of champagne and freaking breaks it off and is just like kind of like, hey, well, get me out of here, as he's still bleeding from the neck. And so all of a sudden we have a person coming from the back of the plane, hearing the commotion, grabs her heel and is to take the end part and go and ram this heel into this guy's eye, which is to kill him. And so they end up dragging the body into a part of the plane. They don't like dump it out. They just drag it to some part of the plane. And like, so because of this guy waking up early, this guy was to get killed. Because we end up finding out the scene that is after that is to all of a sudden have these people starting to wake up. We have a girl named Yoga Pants, who a lot of people might know from, like, maybe there was this show called Scream Queen that I think she was on once, but that's not good enough. She was also on the movie Nerve, which a lot of people may not know, and like Google it, look it up. She's the main character of Nerve, so that should be pretty easy. The 2016 movie Nerve, I think. Anyways, so this girl Yoga Pants is to wake up with like this weird gag upon her mouth. Like it's now one of those like red ball things like you see in like Pulp Fiction, but it's like one of those weird kind of like there's a dog bone that's black that looks like it's covering everyone's mouth. But so all of a sudden Yoga Pants is to wake up and is to eventually see Crystal, who is going to be our main just this girl is gonna take some people freaking down, that's for sure. So all of a sudden Yoga Pants is to make her way into just kind of walking, and she's to start seeing people. She's trying to like, hey, whoever you are and whoever I am, like let's all get together and probably die soon. So eventually there is to be one guy near, because there is a weird large amount, there's a huge crate that is to arrive also in this spot. And we have one guy who is to go and open up this crate with this crowbar that they left there. There's to be this older Air Force guy, or airborne hat guy, that is to say that it's a trap. You can kind of hear him muttering the words trap, and then him running off because he thinks that this is going to be something that's going to explode or some. So this guy's just like, whatever, man, I'm going to see what this box is, because if I die, freaking, I'm probably going to die anyways. So this guy opens this fairly large box up, but it's about the size of probably, like I would say about like two bodies put together. So it's a pretty big box. So, and it's probably like 4 bodies put together so like length 2 bodies and then 4 bodies to. It's a pretty big box. It has like this arsenal of guns, and also has weirdly a couple of pigs for some freaking reason, which I don't understand. I guess to metaphorically say that these people are pigs because of the god awful things that they had said to whoever. So this thing is to be hauled out, this arsenal of guns. And so everybody's like scrambling. They're like, oh, like that's what that is. So everyone is to start to get guns. All of a sudden they also are to see this thing to unlatch their mouth things, their mouthpiece things. They found some keys, so they're just starting to unlatch everybody from that. And so Dawn is to give Yoga Pants this gun, and she's like, I don't know how to do a gun. And Dawn is like, do you know how to do this, right? You know how to like do this thing? And she's like, well, yeah. And like, then you know how to fire a gun. Like, what about the whole like safety? Like, is the safety on? Is it off? Because she could just fire away as much as she can, but nothing's going to happen. So all of a sudden, that's when we start to have like fire, like shots being made. We also have Yoga Pants that is with this guy who is just called Trucker. A lot of people will probably know him from he's the Smallville version of Green Arrow, or he's been in This Is Us. A lot of people probably know him from that. Weirdly enough, I think he did bizarrely an Aquaman live action movie that went absolutely bubkiss nowhere, but like went somewhere for a brief time, but no one cared, I guess, weirdly enough. So Trucker is seemingly skilled with a gun, it seems. But the problem with this is that eventually he'll meet some people that he has to basically try and save, and that will lead him into mistakes being made because everybody starts running off, and so mostly we're focused on Trucker right now because Yoga Pants is to eventually just kind of like get near this box because she almost had gotten shot once by some gun, and then she ends up getting shot in the head, so then she's dead. Like, she is red in the face. That's what I said about Yoga Pants, sadly enough. R.I.P. Memorial. So now Trucker Guy is to be the main focus. We bizarrely have a girl named Dead Sexy. That's what I think her name is in this movie. Is to be inside this box because bullets are flying. So she goes ahead and decides, hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to just run because I think they ran into bullets. I think that I can make a pretty good jot down over to go and be in a safer place. So all of a sudden, this girl starts booking it just for her to land in this little trap that has all these spikes in them. And so she ends up going and getting a chest full of a spike. And now she's screaming, help, help me. And so Trucker's like, mother. Or he has like this, like a pretty sweet handgun, but then and also he has like a kind of a decent like machine gun with a scope on it, oddly. So Trucker is to go and find this girl to find that she had like freaking like chest freaking jabbed herself. So this girl is to bizarrely mention that it's her birthday coming up soon. And I'm like, why? Did she need a backstory? Like, was she just desperately just like, my character needs a backstory. I need to deliver this. Let me pause here for a second so I can do a little bit of a reset here. All right. So, Trucker Guy is to be nice, and so he's like, okay, well, I'll pull you out of this. And then, like, he ends up throwing her over his shoulder and is, like, trying to make it out of there. Starts walking into a part of the forest to all of a sudden step onto a trip mine, which goes off and kills both of these people, to transition us to all of a sudden be focused on this guy who is just called Staten Island, who a lot of people might have seen him in the very first Suicide Squad movie, or a lot of people might have seen him on Mad TV. The list is endless. So Staten Island is to see both of these people get killed, so he's like, well, I'm not going to be walking that way. So eventually Staten Island is to eventually head, and all of a sudden he is to be in a group with a number of people that are all deciding to hop over this fence, which of course this fence is mostly like on the very top of it to be barbed wire. They toss some shirts and stuff to kind of just make their way easily across this barbed wire. And so Staten Island, this guy named Vanilla Nice, and Big Red, that is the girl with the red hair. Vanilla Nice is to be the gangster looking guy, and then yeah. So, but there is also this guy who is to be called Target, who is to, I believe his name is Target, who is to start walking over this fence to all of a sudden start to get arrows in his bate. So Target is to eventually get hit with an arrow, and he is to just decide, well, hey man, like, I'm not going to take this lying down. So Target goes and starts to just fire wildly into the forest to eventually get another arrow seemingly in the chest So he ends up going down. So Staten Island, Vanilla Ice, and Big Red are to eventually just be like, you know what, I'm gonna freaking like I'm out of here. Let's go on. So they eventually walk to this street to eventually get to this gas station, which of course is to be held up by these two characters called Ma and Pop. So Staten Island is to eventually try to tell these people what is going on, and he's also asking them where they are. Ma and Pop is to mention that they're in Arkansas, and it's like, oh yeah, of course, Arkansas. Like, I guess a place that would really be in the middle of nowhere, I guess. But eventually, we find out that this isn't really Arkansas at all. That really, we have Crystal who is to eventually find plates from seemingly a location that doesn't quite seem all of that Arkansas-ish. So, and eventually she tries to figure out what license plate that's from eventually later on. So, Staten Island is to desperately ask for these people's phone, and so Staten Island makes the phone call for the police, and it seems like there is a person that could not give a rip about this guy calling, where it seems that Staten Island is to have had some kind of police experience, because it seems like when he's to call these people, it seems that he knows what he's talking about, and it seems like he just knows a thing or two, but what do I know? So we don't get a backstory of a lot of these characters. Like, they don't specifically say, hey, yeah, I used to be a police officer, or yeah, I am a police officer. They don't say that at all through any parts of this movie. They kind of leave it vague. They kind of leave a lot of people mysterious till eventually just naturally assume they have this weird and wild skill that you like. If anything, maybe Crystal does have some backstory. Supposedly she did a tour in Afghanistan, and but eventually most of what we know about her is that she has just been a person that works at like some car dealership. So Staten Island is to call the police, and so really when that call is to be made, Staten Island is to tell the police officers, like, hey, like, why don't you just trace the call? Like, if I don't even know where I am, trace this call. Like, there's people killing us at this gas station. I was just dropped out of nowhere, and I don't know where I am. I'm very disoriented. I have no clue where I just trace this call. And they're like, oh, yeah, perfect. Trace this call. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And Staten Island hangs up the phone, and he's just like, this doesn't sound right. But eventually, Big Red is to just start going and grabbing some donuts and eating them. And Vanilla Ice is just like, hey, like, how about you give me one of those? And so all of a sudden, Big Red is to eventually just start going down, because we find out most of the food in this convenience store is not all that convenient because it's poisoned. So all of a sudden, Big Red is to drop, and all of a sudden, eventually we get after that, where Pop is to lay some bullets into Staten Island, kill him off, and eventually they're to throw like gas, like flashbangs and all kinds of things into the convenience store, which drops Vanilla Ice for him to eventually get killed also. So we end up finding out that the mom and pa are connected to this whole thing, and that eventually they're getting walkies, uh, like asking about information. So uh, eventually, what's to happen is Pa is to get the mop and to clean up Staten Island's blood as bodies are being dragged to the back of the store. So all these people are just to be dragged to the back of the store, so that way when the next person is to come in, it doesn't look like somebody's been murdered here. So that is to eventually lead us to have Crystal make her way to this gas station, and we're like, okay, what's going to happen with her? Is she not going to put two and two together? Is something going to have evidence of there being a dead person previously here? What is all going to go down? So Crystal is to go into this gas station and intelligently, like, Crystal is to have the ability to have had a thing of money in her boot, which I'm like, okay, that's pretty smart. So Crystal is to ask for some cigarettes. Once eventually she ends up opening the cigarettes, she realizes that the cigarettes aren't even real, that she can't even get a smoke. So Crystal is to ask where they actually are, and of course they are to say that they are from Arkansas. And so Crystal gives this girl money and change for this cigarette, and then all of a sudden Crystal is to go and jump over the counter and kill both these people because it's like, you done f***ed up. Cigarettes are only $6 in Arkansas, because I know, because she, like, I guess knows everything about everything. So I don't know, weirdly she just like has this feeling like she can tell like who's lying or not. So, and she has just wild information, I guess, from maybe having military experience that kind of takes her all over the place. So Crystal goes and kills both these people, and then eventually decides that she is going to steal the walkie that these people are to have, and just eventually just heads out. Luckily, not grabbing any food while that's going on, because while Ma and Pa were waiting for Crystal to show up, like, one of the guys just grabs the soda, and the Ma was just like, "Hey, that's poison." And so all of a sudden, the guy like spits that out. It's like, "Seriously, you even poisoned the sodas?" And she's like, "No, there's a lot of sugar in that." But yeah, so they're just talking about how like Ma and Pa, while they're waiting for Crystal, is talking about how white people are the worst, and like how like they've had certain words that they feel like they can still use now, but then again, like, it doesn't seem quite all that proper. So pushing on now, Crystal is to be outside, just kind of waiting for things. I guess she's just waiting for someone else to show up, whether it's somebody that she can join forces with, or someone that she can be easily forced to just shoot. But Crystal is just kind of waiting it out, wanting to just go on to listen to the radio, or the walkie-talkie, not the radio. Also, Crystal was to go and look at this car and find out that the bumper on this truck was fake. It doesn't actually say Arkansas. Crystal is tempted to almost get in the car, but then realizes that there is a explosive rigged on it, so she denies herself wanting to get into this car because she realizes that that could equal death. So Crystal just waits in the shadows, waiting for someone. She is to hear that supposedly Crystal, like, they can't find where she is. They call her Snowflake, or they call her like Snowball. So eventually, like, she's hearing the radio, and eventually she realizes that, I guess, people are to be listening in. So the people in the walkie-talkie just turn everything off. So all of a sudden, there's to be a drone that is to be flying by to see where they can spot people. And one person with a machine gun is to shoot down the drone. And then this guy who is to be called Gary, or for IMDb, he's to be called Shut the Up Gary, evidently is his name. So Gary is to go and crush this drone. Gary's almost tempted to go and take the truck. Crystal is to whistle and tell him, like, hey, don't get next to that truck. I'm going to be your ally here. And Gary's like, well, how can I trust you? It's like, well, go and look at this truck. Like, it's wired for explosives. Why would I tell you that if I was your enemy? Wouldn't that be stupid? So that just leads to have them wanting to just kind of figure out what the heck to do next. So Crystal is to say, well, I found that there was a railroad, there are railroad tracks like down by this part of town, so I think I'm going to go and do that next. So both Gary and Crystal are just to continue to walk this railroad, and eventually Crystal is to stop to, I guess, pee. I would assess. Who cares? Gary is to mention that his name is Gary, and Crystal is trying to pee, so she's telling him to shut up. So all of a sudden, Crystal is to eventually go and kind of hear or kind of feel that there is a train a coming. So all of a sudden, there is a train a coming. So that leads both Gary and Crystal to now like chase after the train to jump onto it and just think that they can probably maybe like get a far distance away from wherever this place is. So all of a sudden, while these two people are in the train, we find out that they are not exactly alone. All of a sudden, there are to be a bunch of refugees that are all to pop out of here, and eventually, we are to find that there is to be a guy called Crisis Mike who is to be part of these refugees. And so we have these people that are to kind of talk in their native tongue, but then Gary is just to get really upset because he's like, oh my god, these are all crisis actors. Like, these aren't really real. Like, I've exposed every bit of all of this stuff all of this is not real. So Gary is so tempted to tell these people that he's going to kill all of them unless they actually starts like being real in a second or two. So all of a sudden, the train is to stop to eventually be having everyone get collected from this train by this military force. So all of a sudden, Crystal and Gary are to get out of the train, and so Crystal and Gary are to try to talk to this military force that is there, and all of a sudden, Crisis Mike is to all of a sudden speak English now, and is to tell Gary and Crystal, hey, like, whatever you guys are going to say, they're not going to believe you. And they're like, oh my god, he speaks English? It's like, hey man, you should, like, don't even try. They won't even believe anything that you're going to say. And they're like, what the fuck? Like, this guy's been lying to us. Like, so Crisis Mike is to say, like, hey man, like, if we can get out of this, like, and run away from this, like, then eventually I'll come after you guys, but eventually, yeah. So Crisis Mike calls, of course, Gary buddy, and that's what just sets Gary off, which leads to knock over Crisis Mike, find out that Crisis Mike has some grenades in his sack. So Gary grabs one of those grenades, shoves the grenade into Crisis Mike's pants, and then runs off, rolls underneath this train, and then runs like a madman off to frickin' anywhere. Crystal is to just go along with everybody, and so Crystal is to go and talk to these two guys in these suits, which she's to mention, like, hey, call the U.S. Embassy, like, I'm an American, and so eventually this all leads to these people, like, asking her questions, and eventually it gets down to either this Manorgate thing, or that they ask her if she's being hunted. And all of a sudden they pull out this guy named Don, and Crystal's like, who is Don? I don't know who Don is. So all of a sudden Don comes into the fray, and Don is to say, yeah, I was the guy who was hunted, and so Crystal's like, yeah, I was hunted too. So that leads these people to get released to this supposed U.S. embassy guy that is to consistently go on this, like, talking spree with these two, mentioning how, like, well, you guys must have done something to justify all this. You guys must have, like, who are you guys exactly? I want to know who you are, because you guys must have had, like, this coming to you or something. So all of a sudden, Crystal, because of this line of dialogue, Crystal just goes ahead and lifts up both of her legs and freaking kicks this U.S. Ambassador guy just out of this car. And this guy goes flying out of the car, and Crystal just jumps into the driver's seat and runs him over, like runs his head over and kills him. And Dawn is like, what the fuck? Like, why did you do that for? Like, that was insane. And so Crystal is to say that you know what, like, there's something about this guy, and so she ends up popping up the hood to find that Gary is to have a knife in his head. And so then we have Dawn, who's like, oh my god, you were right. Like, wow. So Crystal has to find, like, a stack of different kinds of money just all over this place. And then she's to also find a map. And so Dawn is just like, well, hey, like, let's get out of here. Give me the keys. I'm driving. And Crystal is just like, no, like, I don't want to leave this like that. I don't want us to just go. And we have Dawn, who's just like, why not? Like, let's get out of here. And Crystal's like, no, because she has this whole story just lined up that she was told when she was a kid about, like, it has a kind of familiar, like, Tortoise and the Hare kind of story, where all of a sudden, like, the hare is to go and challenge this tortoise for a race. And so all of a sudden, the hare is to just be like, just trouncing this turtle. He's like, yeah, like, I'm going to race this turtle, and I'm just going to easily just take him out. I'm just going to easily just beat him. It's going to be so great. And, like, the turtle has such a wide lead that he decides, you know what, I'm going to take a nap. Like, I'm going to take a sweet little nap because I have been just trouncing this turtle. So all of a sudden the hare is to fall asleep, take a good old little nap. And so all of a sudden the tortoise, because the hare had slept too long, had all of a sudden won the race. And so you think that story is to be the end. Well, no. So all of a sudden the tortoise is to go home and talk to all of his family members and just be like, hey, I guess you can do anything, right? Like, if you really believed in it hard enough. So all of a sudden the tortoise is to hear a knocking on the door. The tortoise is to open it. It's the hare, and the hare is to go and murder every single tortoise, is to take a hammer and just crush every single shell of every single one of these tortoise members. And then shortly thereafter that, he goes in and eats the rest of their dinner, because that's what they were doing while this door was to be opened and a hare was to come in. And so Dawn is just like, oh my god, that is, like, your mother told you that story? And Crystal's like, yeah. like just kind of telling you maybe how broken Crystal might be, or to tell you like how eventually this woman is to just really just take this event and just be like, aha, this is perfect for me. I am going to wipe all these people out, and no one is going to be able to do a thing. Nobody's going to cuff me. Police isn't going to be called. And so now Crystal is to like think of this as just like, you know what? Maybe this is some time for me to, uh, like, if these people are to get their aggressions out, so can I. So can I. So they go on to this map, and that transitions us to have all of these rich people at this bunker. And all of a sudden, we have, weirdly enough, some guy who is to be a consultant that is to, I guess, have some National Guard experience. But he was also to be in this movie called Tears of the Sun, or Tears from the Sun. I think it was Tears of the Sun, which is to be a Bruce Willis movie, which is actually a legit movie. I've seen it once. It's basically about a bunch of guys who go on this offside of the world and eventually realize that like their mission could have been over, but they decided, kind of like a Saving Private Ryan moment, that they wanted to save all these people, which technically wasn't exactly their mission, but they did it anyways. And pretty much most of them ended up dying to try and save all these like refugees and this doctor that they were trying to get, because all they were really supposed to get was the doctor, but they had to also get they also wanted to get the refugees as well, because the doctor would not leave without these refugees. So they basically ended up having to like forcibly have these people like try to book it to get to a safe point, a safe place. So anyways, pushing on back to our moment. So eventually what is to happen is like these rich people are just kind of like talking things out, and like talking about like stupid crap that they did at some point. And eventually we have this pig that is to all of a sudden arrive into this bunker and to catch all these rich people off guard. So they all of a sudden think that, oh, okay, so like that was just like a pig that came in. Oh, okay, like they kind of tell like maybe how spooked that these people would get if something really happened, which seconds later, that's what really happened. All of a sudden, Crystal comes flying in and starts shooting up everybody, and even takes out the Tears of the Sun guy, who he is to just kind of fall over. He's to get some pretty good looks in, but anyways, like he's to like I mean he's to try to take down Crystal, but it's not gonna happen. So eventually, there is to be an arrow that goes into one of these girls, and so Dawn is to come on in, and like Dawn is to say like, "Holy, you took out everybody," and like even this doctor was to like try and like think that he can get one over on Crystal, but yeah, that didn't happen either. So like the doctor was thinking that he could just outsmart Crystal, but no. So Dawn is to come on in and just be like, wow, you killed basically everybody. You took out everyone. And Crystal's like, yeah, of course I did. So Dawn is to come in with guns blazing, meaning that he doesn't actually shoot a lick of anybody. And so he has his gun drawn and goes in here and is to just be like, well, wait a minute, like maybe this is the perfect opportunity for us to start to ask questions about things. Maybe there's a way for us to figure out what's really going on. And because there's to be one girl with an arrow in the stomach, but like it doesn't really seem like she's going to be dying any second now. So Crystal's like, okay, like we'll ask questions for what good it's gonna do. So Crystal is to ask or let Dawn ask questions. This girl is to give him nothing, and Crystal's to be like, "Oh, great!" And so she ends up shooting her and killing her. Cause it's like, well, you got your questions answered, didn't you? So all of a sudden, the radio is to go on, and we have Athena, this girl named Athena, that is to be uh, going on the radio and is to mention, Dawn, have you killed her? Dawn, have you gotten her yet? And all of a sudden, Crystal's like, Dawn? Like, you're Dawn. Your name is Dawn. Like, you're probably the only one left. And so, all of a sudden, both Crystal and Dawn are now guns drawn. And Dawn's like, dude, I'm not one of them. And Crystal's like, because Crystal doesn't trust anybody. Like, Crystal will easily pull a gun on anybody, shoot them in the head, no questions asked. So, eventually, Crystal is just to fire a gun into Dawn, kill him, and so Crystal is to tell the person on the radio, hey, Dawn's dead. And so Athena is to tell Crystal, like, okay, then it seems like you and me are the only ones left on the table. So how about you head to this location and we'll finish this up. So Crystal is to eventually, before she's to leave, she is to go and talk to the National Guard guy and just say, hey, like, did you ever have actual military experience? The guy says, well, it's in the National Guard. It's like, well, thank you for your service. And she's to be like, well, why did you come here? And supposedly the guy had a favor for Athena and, or needed to do a favor for Athena. Like, he wasn't really getting paid for this. So Crystal is to eventually just talk to this guy, and so Crystal's mentioned she was in Afghanistan and all kinds of things, and that I think what she ends up saying next is that she is to work at some car dealership, and she really can't get what she wants uh, out of this whole thing, and or out of she can't go and murder anybody at her car dealership because it feels like she kept end up having her eyes wide open. It's so she's like, maybe I can just get this out here. Maybe I can do whatever I want here. So I was assessing or assuming that we were gonna have The Hunt 2 and Crystal all of a sudden was going to be the murderer, and then we just find out that Crystal was ahead of the game in The Hunt 2, but who knows. So the National Guard guy is to tell Crystal that this Athena woman has been training for 8 months for this. It seems like she really is going to take down and tear somebody in half and whatever. And Crystal's like, we'll see about that. We'll see about that. So Crystal is to head into this house, and while Crystal is to be kind of hitting the fence intercom to be ushered into this house, Athena is to tell Crystal to put her gun in the mailbox or she's going to blow the fence because there's a bunch of C4 all around that fence. Which you can't really believe what she's saying, but either way, there isn't much of any guns that are to be splayed quickly when Crystal is to get inside this house. So Crystal is to start making her way into Athena's house, which was the girl that ended up putting a heel into a guy's eye and dropping him. So Crystal makes it into Athena's house, and so here's where we start to get some information, because Athena had picked a number of these people and picked every single like code name that they were to have, picked every little bit of something, and so eventually we got to the point where Athena was to eventually just like pick the whole board of people. And anyways, so moving on. So Athena is to have Crystal come into her house. Crystal's making some kind of food, and so uh or not Crystal's making some Athena is making some kind of food. Crystal's just coming in. Athena is to ask Crystal if she was the one to say in exact words about about what was going on in Manorgate. And Crystal was to say, like, yeah, like I said that, maybe. Because Athena is like, well, like, none of this was actually going on, but you guys all put this all out there into the internet that we're killing people here, supposedly. So that's why we all picked you. And Crystal was like, well, like, so, but you are killing people here because really, like, you have killed people here, but like people have just found you out, so that's why you have to start like snuffing all this out. So there's kind of this like back and forth like chess mind game going on because eventually Crystal is to also tell Athena that, and here's also the problem, like they didn't actually get the right Crystal. Like there's another girl that is to uh, have her name with them, like Crystal's last name is to supposedly be May, but her last name is to be like spelled without an E, and this other girl is to have a name with an E. Like Crystal's to mention that this other Crystal, she's to get mail from her, like that's actually hers all the time. Like there's always confusion about these two people, and also that her mother is still alive and that her like her father is doing well and whichever, and so like Crystal's like, yeah, you messed up, you got the wrong girl. I'm not justice for y'all. Like, no, I'm not that at all. So all of a sudden, like the mind games continue to turn and continue to spin, and so all of a sudden Athena is to eventually just like, you know what, like how about we just stop all these pleasantries and just get down to it. Like let's just knock it out, let's just brawl it out. So eventually finally they get into this fighting, and so like we just see a cluster of things all going on here. We just see like eventually knives being grabbed that end up getting knocked out of people's hands. Eventually, Athena is to run to eventually find the shotgun, and Crystal is to mention that she cheated to get this shotgun. Which I'm like, hey, if Athena is to find it and Crystal didn't, like fair game, I guess. The only problem is Athena like could not be able to fast enough be able to load this gun once she fires it once, and so they end up tussling for the shotgun. Athena ends up trying to choke Crystal with the shotgun, but eventually they just get the shotgun out of the way, and then eventually they're just eventually tussling through the house, flying through glass doors, and eventually they're just like giving themselves a break for a minute, and then all of a sudden they just start going and thrashing through more parts of this like this part of this home. I think it's the backyard to get back into the house to almost crash into another glass window where Athena's like, wait a minute, like no more glass, no more glass. So they just open the door and then they fight more. And so eventually this leads to have Athena randomly grabbing like two random pieces that she ends up stabbing Crystal with. And then Athena's like, ha ha ha, I got you. And then eventually Crystal is to kind of like pull these things out of her body, like pull this one thing out of her shoulder to stab, uh, or try to stab Athena, but it doesn't quite work. And so Crystal ends up basically just giving like Athena a bear hug, which is to with what Crystal is stabbed with, Athena is going to get stabbed with also, and so Athena is to drop, and so that's when Crystal and Athena are to both fall over, and so Crystal is to tell Athena, it's like, well, hey, guess what? I got you too. Like, I got you, you're dead. So Athena, before she is to die, she asks one last. Well, there's a number of questions that are happening. Crystal is to ask Athena why Snowball. And so Athena is to mention about some farm book that happened such a long time ago, and coincidentally, Crystal had read that book, and like she didn't really understand why she was still called Snowball. And so Athena, before she was to die, was to ask Crystal, it's like, well, before I die, like, did I actually get the right crystal or did I not? Like, no one's gonna know. Uh, and like, it would just, like, before I die, just tell me the truth if I got the right crystal or not. And Crystal's like, nope. So Athena's like, whoops. Like, yeah, so more than likely, you probably got the wrong girl that actually had a number of skills that you weren't aware of to be completely unprepared for what is to go on. So Athena dies, and so now we have Crystal who is to go on and basically burn all of her runes, so that way to just kind of seal them up. And then Crystal is to put on a nice dress. She's to get some nice pair of sunglasses. And then she's to head off to this airplane and to hold a gun on people and basically just tell them, hey guys, you're going to take me back to where I'm from. And nobody's going to have a problem about it. So the stewardess to go on and start making food uh, for uh, for of course Crystal, because this girl is to give her caviar. I think the very beginning sequence, the stewardess was to offer Richard caviar, and he was like, "No, I just want some vegetables, just chopped up vegetables." And this girl's like, "What do you think? We have a kitchen here?" Like, no. So Crystal is to already have a champagne bottle in hand, and so she starts drinking it. And so the stewardess is like, "How does it taste?" And she's like, "Perfect." And so that's how the movie just fizzles off, and it basically is to. That's really just the end of just one person, I guess, had to win all of this, and that had to be Crystal. So interesting movie, but I think I spent also way too much time talking about this. I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.